What's good, y'all? This is Robert Jackson, and thank you for tuning in to Station Square. First off, I just want to thank everybody who came to Sonic Revolution this past weekend. It's a small little convention dedicated to Sonic the Hedgehog, and I really, I loved getting to meet all of y'all, and thank you for coming. And yeah, I hope everybody had an amazing time this past weekend, and I should. I'll just promote and share my upcoming, convention stuff at the end of this. But today, we're going to be chatting with somebody who has been working like in the industry, like particularly in LA for a while. I wanted to introduce Mr. Jonathan Bullock on the podcast. So yeah, thank you, Jonathan, for joining me on this overcast Wednesday afternoon in LA. Thank you for, taking the time to do this with me today. How are you doing, my good sir?
I am good. I'm good. Bit of a correction. I've actually only been in LA for a month, but that is where I'm
Ah,
based
okay,
currently.
nice.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
just moved here.
Oh,
But yeah.
congrats, by the way.
Oh yeah, thank you. It was I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast as far as I could possibly go. Um, but yeah, it's been an adventure. Definitely a change of pace. Um, but yeah, just a little bit about me and my journey. So I started voiceover back in 2011. Um, I started back on Voice Acting Alliance. Rest in peace. It was a really much different and smaller voiceover community back in the day. Um, but it had its own kind of charm. This was back before Discord was really a thing, so most people kind of congregated on Skype. But I got started. I used to watch Dragon Ball Z Abridged, as you do, and I followed Masako X's YouTube channel. Masako X voices Goku in that. And he's like, I'm doing some lessons on how to do voiceover. And me, a weeb, is like, okay, voiceover. That sounds cool. So I watched all. I think it was 10 videos of his on how to do voiceover, do different voices, like resonances, stuff like that. It was really informative. It's unfortunately not really out anymore for people to watch, but it was a really great resource for me. But I just followed his instructions, found Voice Acting Alliance, and yeah, met some really great people through there. Stephen Kelly, absolutely fantastic. Uh, my favorite British person. Um, and yeah, since then, I think around my fourth year of doing Voice Acting Alliance and doing the fan dub scene, I got my first commercial demo, and that was really the beginning of a change for me because starting to understand like, oh, there's more than character work. Like the commercials you hear, that's voices, that's people doing that get hired for this as a job. It's not just some like random person. And it was really cool to learn that. And so since then I've done stuff for Travelers Insurance nationwide, uh Govey, Nike, uh Coca-Cola, um a bunch of really fun stuff. Bojangles, Smite, of course. Um, yeah, yeah. It's been really great. I'm glad I finally got to come out here though. So definitely more opportunities.
Yeah, it's really nice talking about your background. Excuse me, your background a little bit. When it comes to VO and actually funny story that I have about Masako. So this was like years ago. Um, And I think at the time, like, I think they were just getting ready to record for episode 60. Because I think this was around the time that, like, I think they were just kind of going through, like, the copyright legal stuff, with
Sure.
Toei. So it was before they actually got to 60. So I was like saying to him, oh boy, are you ready to. Are you prepared to do that big Gohan Super Saiyan transformation scream? And he's like, "Oh, don't worry. I've totally got it." And yeah, this was like, "Oh boy, that's going to be the big one." So,
Right.
just want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yells are rough. Yells are rough.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, like, I've had to do like a couple of yells for audition sessions, and Yeah, it's a throat ripper, let me tell you.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's healthy ways to do it. Of course, you got like the throat coat tea, stuff like that to kind of prep yourself. Um, but yeah, yeah, character work.
Yeah. So, anyways, and please, pardon me, my allergies. I'm still trying to get over a little cold I got,
Totally.
but, um, see. Anyways, so yeah, you told your origins, and you've been doing this since 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
I know it's hard. It's hard to believe for me too.
Yeah, so 2011, wow. How's the whole journey and the process like for you? Like, I know that you've been doing this for like over a decade, so how would you describe, like, your little voice acting journey, so to speak? Your little conquest.
So kind of stop and start. So when you first get started, you find your community, and I don't know how much this is so much now, but back then it's like, oh, we really like this clip from anime. Let's do a dub of it, and you'll have maybe someone direct or like record on your own, and the quality will be fine or not. Like my first microphone that I recorded on for Voice Acting Alliance was my MacBook Pro internal microphone, which
Ooh, we're
yeah,
going
rough,
back.
rough.
Ooh.
um, but once you start to find out about the equipment that's needed and how to treat your space and stuff like that, that's when things start to really move forward. Um, uh, and especially with Voice Acting Alliance having Voice Acting Club and Casting Out Club have kind of taken its place since then with having access to paid projects. But back then, like for instance on Twitter now, there's projects like all the time, unpaid or paid. Um, People have access to it. But back then, when there was a paid project, everyone was trying to get in on that. But back then, there was only like, I want to say maybe 100 of us basically now. And I know now, like the World's Divide project that just closed up their audition submissions. The guy said he got 3,000. I'm like, absolutely not. Like I would not want to go through that. Um, but it's interesting to see how it's changed since then. So like Team Four Stars people, those people, Stephen Kelly, Antfish, for example, they were kind of really the first generation of online voiceover talent. Um, and so they had to kind of figure everything out on their own. Like, oh, how do we use equipment? Like if you didn't have any kind of audio or engineering kind of background, you'd have no idea where to start because there was no one talking about how to do it. Because even back then, you'd go into a studio to audition for voiceover projects most of the time. And so I'd say I'm probably part of the second generation of online voiceover. So we kind of had Team Four Star and people like that to be like, oh, okay, so this person says to do this. Let's try that. Now I'd say we're probably on the I want to say fifth or sixth generation, and there's so many of us, especially on Twitter. Um, and it's been really cool to see how the accessibility into it has come up and grown, and it's nice to have that community.
Oh, absolutely. So that's what you consider to be like how like the industry had evolved since you first started in like 2011 up to now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. um and let me see, so when it comes to, I mean, you brought up a really good point when it comes to interacting with people in the community, making those relationships with people, and just making a lot of really great friends and colleagues along the way. That can also be really, crucial when it comes to, I guess, your presence, or when it comes to you, just knowing those solid connections. Because I know they say that it's who you know, who knows you, that type of thing. So it's kind of like So with the bookings that you receive, was it due to word of mouth or was it you on like a roster or like a part of somebody's talent pool? Like um how is the process like with you in particular? Just out of curiosity.
So for me, I feel like I've really had to fight to kind of establish any sort of
Oh, that
presence.
too. Yeah.
Being like, for instance, Sound Cadence, their roster was one of the earliest ones that has lasted to this point. It's extremely hard to get on their roster because it is so full. But like that's how I booked Death Battle. I think I auditioned for Death Battle like maybe 40 times before I got Iron Fist. And that's that session shredded my throat. They're like, "Are you okay?" But yeah, applying for every possible roster, every opportunity. Um, while it is important to know what you can and cannot do in terms of like vocal tone, like for instance, if you've got a voice that's kind of up here and it's like, "Oh, hi, we've got this orc character that we're gonna go for," unless you can go for that and really sustain it for like 4 hours, it's gonna look bad to casting, and they might take you off their list if you have access to that. So it's really important to be aware of your limits. And of course, you can expand your range with practice, and being healthy and, eating right, staying hydrated is always, of course, important for that. Um, but, always be aiming to stay growing. That was something that kind of happened for me around 2014, 2016. Like, I would book little games here and there, but I didn't really know that there were voiceover classes that were starting to come out at that point. So when you've got your, like, your established friend group, everyone's like, "Oh, that was so good, that was so good," but you don't have any outside influence, which is why it's so important to have community and be consistently making those new friends, especially ones that are at higher levels than you, so that they can give you real and honest feedback. And of course, it's even more important to be open to hearing it, and not too prideful to be like, "Oh, I have stuff I still need to work on. I need to continue to learning. I don't know everything." You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Never be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely.
Um but yeah, so where were you from originally before like prior to your LA move?
So I am from Virginia, very close to Richmond. Um, been
Oh,
there for
wow,
this
man.
is I'm 30 now. I hope to be out here sooner, but I'm really glad that I came when I did, just because I feel that I'm finally at a place where I'm happy with my acting level, that I feel confident that I'm bookable, that I know what I'm doing, and that when I get into a session, I can give them what they ask for.
Yeah, so we're like talking way out in the east, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, and how was the move, by the way?
honestly, it wasn't too bad. So, my roommate, now we were looking for a place because he had to sell, or not sell. The owner was said they were gonna sell the house that they were living at. So he's like, "Dude, I gotta go," and I'm like, "All right." So we found this place, and I had some sessions I had to do, so I didn't even get to come out here for almost 3 weeks. But once I finally finished all my sessions, um, the very next morning, I headed out to LA, packed everything up in one single night, and yeah, it really wasn't bad. It's just exhausting for all the flights.
Oh, dude, trust me. um, Having to pack for a flight is no joke, and especially packing if you're moving someplace else, it's like that's a whole different ballpark altogether, man.
Yeah, luckily I was able to. I had to pay to get my car transported, like a couple $1,000, but I was able to like stuff my car with most of the things that I needed, so that was a relief.
Yeah. So I think this is something you've touched upon in another podcast, but different acting styles. Because I know
Yes.
that um if you're playing a video game or if you're watching a movie, a show, like as nerds, we consume like a lot of media, and trust
Oh
me,
yeah.
I use nerds like quite affectionately because we are all big nerds, big kids at heart. So like
Yep.
when we're watching something, we tend to notice like the different acting, like the different styles of the different shows that we watch. Um, like say if you're watching a show on Nickelodeon, it's gonna fare much differently for if you're watching something that's on Nick at Night or Cartoon
Sure.
Network with Adult Swim, HBO, Netflix, Disney, Hulu. There's a lot of different and especially if you research like who are the showrunners, okay, who are the producers, what network is this? There's a lot that goes into it. Um, so for you in particular, um, when it comes to brushing or studying upon the many different acting, like I guess quirks or styles, was it something that you've kind of eventually developed into your own? Because I know you mentioned like you started watching Dragon Ball Z Abridged, and now since then there's been a lot of, I mean, clearly more stuff has come out since then. So when it comes to learning different styles, like, um, did you start out like, you know, because if you're watching something, you start taking cues from how they did it and then eventually molding it into your own, unique little niche.
Yeah.
Like,
So
yeah.
so excuse me. For me, I started the weeb way, and I'm like, listen to my impression of Ichigo from Bleach.
Oh
And
no.
so,
Oh, impressions. Oh yeah. I
trying
mean,
to
not to
like
say that
do
they're
the
bad, but
voice. Of
yeah.
course, that did help to kind of learn archetypes, but learning impressions is definitely more of an advanced thing to do, or for fun, because there's plenty of people who can do those things and get paid for it quite well, like Family Guy, South or not South Park, American Dad, the people who do the impressions of like the political leaders, stuff like that. Those people are already out there and they're well established. Of course, as people cycle, there will be those opportunities. But it's so important to learn how to act in your own voice, um, because that's really your base. That's where everything else comes from. So like you can add, textures and stuff to your natural voice, but you kind of want to keep it there. Like for instance, if you notice when you hear Matthew Mercer, you know it's Matthew Mercer because I mean you could have even when he was voicing orcs in Shadow of War, for example, you hear that Matthew Mercer tone, and it's keeping that basis of that's who this is, that's the authenticity that this person brings to it that no one else can really imitate correctly, is that bookable kind of that golden ticket. And of course, there's so many jobs coming through, there's so many different opportunities that I would say that every voice really does have an opportunity or something that they are just right for in their normal voice. But in terms of different styles, there's multiple styles even just in anime alone. Like you've got like your I made a joke about this today, but like Mermaid Melody, for instance, is gonna be like more upbeat and like cheery, right? Versus like a Demon Slayer or something more shonen. And it's important to be aware of the type of genres. Like Dark Souls, for example, has its own type of style. Like it's rise, brave, tarnished, and it's very slow. It's very methodical. There's really not a lot of up emphases, for example, and that's a style. Persona, I don't know what this new cast is going to sound like. Congrats to them, but I'm sure that's going to be slightly different than the original sort of style, even though they do have the same company running it, which is pretty cool. Other styles. Of course, you've got your theatrical, you've got your hyper grounded. Like, for instance, Jedi Survivor is what I would call hyper grounded, which is it's got that on screen aspect to it, like you're watching something, but you get to play it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like Cameron Monaghan's performance as Cal is like a really great example of what you can do without having to push it too far to make it unbelievable. Because having that authenticity, and even for anime, for example, you can still bring that authenticity to it by doing these crazy up and downs and bringing all this life to it in that way. But having the authenticity behind it is, like Rengoku, for example, in Demon Slayer. Rengoku is a lot of people's favorite character because you could tell that he believed the things that he was saying in that performance.
Yeah, and um you mentioned earlier that like taking an influence and then molding it and making it into your own. I think, let me see. Crispin Freeman said it when you take his workshops. It's like good actors borrow, but great actors steal. Like, for example, for Matt Mercer, like you can take the his McCree character and then add a little bit of a texture, a growl to it, and then um depending on the character, of course, like maybe they're more like the lone wolf, maybe they're more out, like, I don't know, maybe they're crazy or whatever the description says. So you take those traits and then you expand upon them and then mold it into your own. Add, it's definitely bringing the best you into each performance. Like each character is kind of like different facets and different aspects about our personalities. And I feel like as storytellers, we add a little bit of ourselves into each role that we are playing. And I think Crispin also said that loving the art and you rather than loving um than placing yourself into the story. Like we all have stories to tell. All of us. Because
Absolutely.
we're big kids in a playground just building sandcastles. It's kind of like that. If we're going to use that analogy.
Minecraft. Yeah.
Minecraft. Yes. Yes, indeed.
yeah, absolutely. It's so important to be able to build up your voices and stuff like that. Like you were mentioning about the gravel to it. I was actually taking a class yesterday, and they were just talking about how you never know what voice, even if for instance, I used to have a real problem. Like, okay, I see the art of this audition, I see the character art for this audition. I need to make a voice that fits the character. And of course, my acting was there, but you lose just a little bit of that authenticity when you're not building from your own voice. Because, the throat is very flexible. You can do so much with it. Um, in my perspective, you can kind of have 3 or 4 different aspects to it. You've got the breathiness, you've got grit and gravel, and you've got nasality. Of course, there's other places, other resonances that you can also hit. But I would say those 3 things you can add 2 things, almost like building a Lego. Like they fit together, and you can make a completely unique voice in that way. But for instance, if you're going to an orc voice, for example, let me pull down here a little bit. If you're going to an orc voice and you automatically just jump into it, that's right. You see how it kind of comes off as like too pressured, too much. But if you build it, okay, so here's my voice. So I'm gonna lower the pitch, and this is still my voice, but I've just lowered the pitch. Right, added a bit of an accent. Now if I add just a little bit of grit to it, and you put your jaw forward, then you've got a much healthier type of orc. Right? You see how it doesn't sound like it's too pressured or anything like that?
Oh, I could tell. I definitely can hear the difference.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it's like if you're doing an org, a lot of people think you gotta drop down to your throat like this. Which, no. It's more about like, okay, let me see. What's a good example? Like, but if you do something like this, and then you bring your jaw forward, and then it's like, and now you just talk real deep and low like this. Just be really chill. Yeah, I see you right there. Yeah, so you move your lips, mouth a little bit, and then you just kind of have this cool posture in you, you know? and also about the physicality because if you're moving your face around, like if you're, playing a character, like physicality can really also help. Like if a character's like cool, laid back, I just move my arms back, just
Yep.
casually lean against a wall. But if a character's really nervous, then my shoulders, I'm like really I get really scared. I get a little breathy. Are you sure we could really do this? And my eyes and everything, there's like tension. So the smallest changes can really help make just the smallest touches can really make a big impact in your performance, which is
Absolutely.
something else that you've also touched upon before. But yeah, making those subtle adjustments can really help create a stronger character.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
even like visualizing what your character is doing, like
Yeah.
when you have an audition with like no context or whatever, building up the scene from scratch in your head, like if they're leaning against a wall, they're probably going to sound more relaxed because they're being supported. But if they're, you know, hanging onto like the edge of a roof or something, it's going to be much harder to speak because they're not able to breathe as much as they probably could. And so you see how it changes the pacing, it changes kind of the proximity, and this is a really important one that a lot of people don't know about is proximity. For example, if you're yelling down to someone from the top of a cliff, you're going to speak farther, not just louder, right? So that's going to be the difference between like, "Hey, what you doing down there?" versus pulling it down. Let's see. "Hey, what you doing down there?" Because you're trying to project it. You're trying to make sure that they hear, right? And that's not something I really hear a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, because if you're talking to somebody, say if they're way on the other side of the auditorium, the projection and the proximity sound, it definitely makes a huge difference. Like, let me see. I know that Bob Bergen did like a really good video where it's different intentions, different proximity sound, and you could just hear the difference when it comes to recording different takes. Now, different takes means if you've got something that's so here's what and this is something that I used to struggle with, is having the takes that sound kind of nearly identical when
Yeah.
really if there's a different intention or a different I don't know, intensity level that you want to do, or if a character has a different personality, if there's a different unique interpretation of how you approach a scene, then yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Different intentions, different scene partners. And I mean, it is acting. It's not about like, okay, changing your voice vocally, different giving a different voice. It's not really the same as having a completely different character behind it. That's really what it all comes down to.
Yeah,
I'm not
because
really the
because
best at it.
casting, especially
Yeah.
higher level casting, is going to know if you can do a line in some voice in one way, they're going to assume you can do that line in the same voice in any other way. So having a completely different setup for that second take is really what gives you that extra shot at it. Sometimes
Yeah.
though, and this is more with indie casting I've noticed, casting has a tendency to not really listen to second takes, especially if the first take is weak. So you always want to make sure to lead with your strongest take. That is a matter of your personal opinion. Um, but you need that special something. And this is something I was talking to somebody about yesterday. It doesn't necessarily need to be the take that gets you cast. It needs to be an interesting take that they might use to place you as someone else in it. They need to see that you can act, you can make choices, you can do maybe a little bit of improv in the line, um, and really make it your own, even if it's a completely wild, just off the cuff kind of choice. Of course, you do need to keep it to the line and the scene context within reason, but making a memorable take is what's most important.
Exactly. Mind of a demo producer. Yeah, casting 101. There
Yep.
you go. There's your advice. um, yeah, I usually ask, like, w- let me see. So, what are some of the roles that really meant a lot to you personally so far?
So getting into Smite for the first time was incredible. So my first character there was Badlands Vulcan, which was this kind of Mad Max inspired character, and I believe this was maybe 2016. Definitely starting to feel a little discouraged. Wasn't booking as much as I'd like to, but I get this audition, and I'm like, I think I can do this. So I think I did an insane amount of takes. But I understood the character. I understood the genre of that Mad Max desert, and I horrible vocal health techniques that I did to get it, but it was so grindy and sandy that I was like, I'm gonna get this, and if I don't get this, I don't know what I'm gonna do because I gave this 100%. But I think it was like a month later. They're like, yeah, come on in. I'm like,
You almost destroyed your voice, but you did it. It was worth it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And
vocal
yeah,
vocal health is just so important.
totally. Yeah,
Um,
so it's mental health,
yeah,
always.
yeah, and I was talking to somebody about this recently too. It's just how it's so easy to get burnt out, especially in the online voice actor space, because you just feel not confident because you're not booking what you want to, the roles. You think you like, okay, I've got this 100%, and it's important to have that confidence and bring that to it. But it's so important to keep in mind that there are so many talent, and it's not that your talent is like lesser than. Of course, it is, always important to keep training, but there is the right role for your voice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, what media are you consuming, or what is something that you're getting into now that you want to recommend to people?
Grounded performances. Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order are great examples because there's a bit of an issue right now with the online voice acting community, and the thing is, it's a style. It's the anime style. A lot of people love anime. They love the media of it. They love how they connect to these characters, and so in voice acting, they adopt this style. And it's important to know this style. It's important to use this style. But it's also important to know what genre it's appropriate for. Because if you don't know these different types of styles by consuming this kind of media, like for instance, Has Been Hotel, right? Indie animation, got its own style. It's not anime. It's got a mix of North American animation and a bit of groundedness to it, right? So it's believable performances, which is why I think people gravitated so much to it. And like Angel Dust, which I got to audition for, Michael Kovac, freaking. But anyway,
Hey.
absolutely earned it. But Kovac is great. Um, but do you understand what I'm saying? Just having that
Oh,
sense
totally.
of
Yep. Yeah.
groundedness and awareness of the genres, like we already talked about, is is what you need because you can't audition with the anime style for everything. And I've been listening to a lot of casting stuff. I've been doing some casting, and the anime style is kind of what's the online voiceover standard. Of course, if you're doing commercial work, stuff like that, you've kind of got a better handle on things often, and you can find that work, but it does take a lot of effort. Um, but being aware of the genres, knowing what's appropriate, and you can usually tell that just based on the art. And do your first take. This is a technique Jesse and Okala and I were talking about. But you want to do your first take, which is what you think that they're expecting, right? This is what you think. Oh, this is what the casting director wants based on the art, the lines, the scene context, right? Then you want to do your second take, which is something different but higher energy, and I'm talking massive, insane, ridiculous energy, right? Then you do a third take. Do the first one again. Do that first take again, And you're going to notice you have more energy to it, more life, and it's going to be a more believable performance because you've given yourself the freedom to go crazy with it. And that's often what will get you cast. Is that delicate balance of acting and energy, because there's a lot of people auditioning that just don't have that energy that a role needs. And it's a very easy fix, and I definitely recommend anyone to try that way. So keep your first take, delete the second, which is the crazy one, do a third take, send those two takes off.
Interesting. Yeah, so in your opinion, what are your what's the biggest, like, I guess, challenges or I mean, I know you mentioned a lot about mental health earlier, but anything else that you want to discuss that you've personally would like to share when it comes to the struggles or like um the hurdles that you have to overcome working as a full-time voiceover actor, artist and stuff? Like the struggles of an artist and ye if you want to share
Right.
that.
So I'm very blessed to have consistent clients that come back to me over and over again. I work with this one client 5 days a week, so that takes care of my bills. I don't have the same struggles that a lot of beginning full time voiceover talent have, and I'm incredibly blessed to have that opportunity. And that's why it's so important to always be on the lookout for clients of any type. And it's so important to know that commercial, e-learning, narration, that work is going to pay you far more than any union character work pays more, but it's going to pay you more than dubbing anime, for example. Booking a real commercial job at the appropriate rate is going to be 200 to 250 bucks an hour, and that's not including usage. For example, I booked a Virginia lottery spot a good couple of years ago, and the session was 200 bucks, which is a normal session fee. But usage is where they're going to use it and for how long. So they wanted to use it on TV and radio. So that's 200 bucks for usage for, I think it was 6 to 12 weeks, I forget. And then the next year, they liked the ad so much, they brought it back again. They renewed it. So I got that usage fee again. So I got like another 400 bucks. And that's the kind of work that you want to be looking for. And being in the character space, you can get that. For instance, the people who dubbed Naruto, right? A lot of that dialogue they were able to use, from my understanding, for the game. Of course, they did have them come in for different attacks, stuff like that, of course. But often they can reuse content, and so you get paid for the use of that already pre-recorded content. And there's just so many different genres that are fun to do. E-learning is for example, it's like the super boring like training modules be aware of ladders or stairs in the workplace, like that kind of thing, right? And it's fun. All types of voiceover have their own type of fun. While the content may be boring, getting to act, everything is acting, even if it's super dry content or YouTube top 5, anything is you can find enjoyment in.
Yeah, stay tuned for part 2 where I finish up and I just ask the last questions. So stay tuned for part 2, folks.